Hello, this is Chef John from foodwishes.com with Duck Fesenjan. That's right, not only is this amazing Persian stew mysterious and exotic, it's also very holiday-ish. And as usual, our standard ethnic food disclaimer applies. Of course, your Persian grandmother doesn't make it exactly like this. That's fine, we know that going in. But not trying a new recipe because you're afraid it's not going to come out like the authentic version is pretty silly. So we don't worry too much about that around here, and really neither should you. So let's go ahead and get started, and for that we're going to need a bunch of duck legs, which from what I hear is the original meat, although these days chicken is much more common. But anyway, I really love duck, so I decided to try it with duck legs. And before we brown these, we're going to generously season them with salt and freshly ground black pepper. And then we're going to head over to the stove to brown this thoroughly. And for that, I'm going to use a very heavy-duty skillet set on high heat with just a little bit of vegetable oil in there to get it started. And we're going to place those in skin side down, and we're going to want to brown those very well. So take your time, let that skin side get some beautiful color, something like this, and then we'll flip it over and give that meat side a minute. But it is mostly the skin side we want to sear. So I went ahead and I browned off all my duck legs. And as you do those, we're just going to reserve those on a pan or a plate until our stew is ready to accept them. So those are looking good. And at that point, we're going to turn off our heat and do two things. Pour the duck fat into a bowl. We're going to use a little bit of that to brown our onions. And also, of course, anytime we sear meat, we always deglaze with a little water or stock so we can use that delicious fond in the stew. Just makes sense. And by the way, if you're wondering why I didn't just sear the duck in the kettle I'm going to make the stew, well, I'm going to explain in the blog post. I don't have time right now, plus it's not that interesting. So I threw in a splash of water. Of course, that's going to release all that goodness from the bottom. So at this point, we're going to put some kind of heavy kettle or pot or Dutch oven like I'm using. On medium heat, we're going to drizzle in a little bit of that reserved duck fat and also a little bit of olive oil. And we'll toss in some diced onions with a pinch of salt, and we'll cook that stirring on medium heat until these onions are pretty much golden brown. I know, usually we stop when they're translucent, but here we do want to go a little bit farther and take them past translucent to something that looks more like this. So those are looking pretty good right there. And at this point, we're going to go ahead and add our spices. And there's only a couple, but they're very important. Don't skip any of these. So first up, we're going to want a nice spoonful of turmeric, a beautiful spice and incredibly good for you. We're also going to want some cinnamon and some nutmeg, but not just any old nutmeg. We're going to freshly grate some nutmeg in. Oh, you know that's how we do it around here. So please buy the whole nutmeg and grate it yourself so as not to insult your guests. And we'll give that a stir, and let's cook those spices in that mixture for about a minute to kind of wake up the flavors. And after about a minute, it's safe to introduce our stock. So I'm going to dump in some chicken broth. Yes, that was from a carton. Hey, don't judge me. I could have swore I had some homemade broth in the freezer, but I didn't. But you know what? It was organic and all natural. Oh, and obviously, you're going to add that liquid from your deglaze pan to this broth. And then it's time for two more incredibly critical ingredients. The first of which would be honey. I guess try to use Persian honey if you can find it, although I'm not sure if that's even a thing. And then besides the honey, we're also going to add some pomegranate syrup, also sometimes known as pomegranate molasses. This might be the one thing you have trouble finding, but it's super easy to find online, and I guarantee any Middle Eastern specialty food store will carry it. And I'll give a bunch more information about that on the blog post. So we'll stir that in, and we'll actually raise our heat up to high. We want to bring this up to a simmer. And while we're waiting, we will prep the last major ingredient, the walnuts. So we're going to take about 3 cups of walnut halves and grind them in our food processor pretty fine. And not only do the walnuts obviously flavor the stew, this is also basically what thickens it. And once that's set, let's go ahead and transfer that into a dry saute pan, set on medium heat, because before we add these to our stew, we want to toast them, but not too far. Do not burn your walnuts. All right, the color's not going to change a lot. It might get one shade darker, but really, ultimately, your nose knows best. So toast those ground walnuts over medium until they're very fragrant and smell like toasted walnuts, at which point we will transfer those into our pot, and we'll stir that in. And then, of course, we're also going to transfer back in our duck legs, and there should be just enough liquid to barely come to the top. All right, so if you have to add another splash of broth or water, go ahead. And then from this point, it's standard stew procedure. It's going to come up to a boil. You're going to reduce your heat to low to maintain a nice, steady, gentle simmer until your meat is fork tender. And if you're using chicken, it's going to be quicker. But I simmered these duck legs for about 3 or 4 hours, nice and slowly. And when it gets towards the end, you just keep checking it with a fork. And right here, they were close, but I decided to give them a little more time. But you'll monitor, and you will make that decision. All right, you're the Rocky Raccoon of your duck, Fesenjan. And once you've determined your duck or chicken has been cooked to the point of succulence, I'm going to go ahead and fish those out and transfer those into some kind of dish to keep warm while we finish the sauce. So if you think it's going to take a while, you can just cover that with foil and put it in a warm oven. And then to finish the sauce, all we really need to do is reduce it a little bit till it thickens. So basically just crank the heat up, bring it back up to a boil, let it reduce. Duck legs have a lot of fat, so feel free to skim off any of that pools on the surface. And besides reducing the sauce a little bit, the only other thing you got to do here is, of course, taste for seasoning. Right, you want it sweeter, maybe a little more honey. You want it a little tangier, add a little more pomegranate syrup. And of course, and most importantly, you're going to check for salt. And like I said, all we're waiting for is for that sauce to reduce down to your desired texture. So right here, I was getting pretty close, but I actually decided to give it a few more minutes. I wanted it a little thicker. So fast forward about 5 minutes later, my sauce was finally how I wanted. So I'm going to go ahead and ladle that over. Let's go ahead and finish up with a little bit of fresh parsley, a little bit of chopped walnuts, and if you got them, some fresh pomegranate seeds. And of course, if you want that to sound a little fancier, you call those pomegranate jewels. But either way, that is one gorgeous looking plate. Just a beautiful combination of fork tender, succulent meats with that sort of sweet, sort of tangy, very, very rich, decadent sauce. Just a truly unique and incredibly delicious experience. So anyway, now you know how to make this great Persian stew, or at least my version of it. And of course, we already showed you how to make Persian rice. So I guess the only thing we need now is a Persian dessert, which I'm not sure exactly what that would be, but I'm assuming more than a few of you will give me some suggestions in the comment section, which will be a nice change of pace from the crazy rants. And sure, this takes a few hours to cook, but it is a very simple and easy recipe to pull off and would make a very, very impressive main course at your next special occasion dinner. So I really do hope you give this a try. Head over to foodwishes.com for all the ingredient amounts and more info as usual. And as always, enjoy.